Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses. This hearing is on a topic that is very important and deeply personal to me. Little known fact, I was a student athlete many years ago when I was in college. I played on the Caltech football team, Go Beavers. When there was a Caltech football team, given the high quality and caliber of student athletes at our witness table, you'd probably argue that doesn't count, and maybe it doesn't. But then later in my life, I got into video game development, and my company did the development of NCAA college football for EA Sports for a couple of years in 1998 and 1999. And I remember vividly having the argument of, like, why can't we use the student athletes' names in the game? You know, they told us that we could use your number, we could use your stats, we could make a player that looked vaguely like you but not too much like you. You know, and I remember vividly saying, this is completely stupid because everybody loses, right? The student athletes lose because they're not allowed to get compensated. We as game designers lose because we're not allowed to design a game around the athletes as we wanted to. The players of the game lose because they're not allowed to see the players that they love and recognize in the games that they bought. So we have an opportunity here to create a system where everybody wins, where student athletes are allowed to play the game and the sports that they love, where colleges are allowed to benefit from having these sports, where millions of fans around the country are allowed to participate in these sports and root their teams on, right? So I guess my message is, let's not mess it up, because we need to create a system here where everybody wins. And if we create a system where someone loses, then we're not doing our jobs right. So one of the kind of recurring themes that has been in today's testimony has been around this question of whether or not student athletes are employees. And I think it's really interesting because it fits into a larger debate that we're having here in Congress about whether or not, when someone says, look, I don't want to be an employee, and an entity says, I don't want to be an employer, does the federal government have the right to step in and say, you both lose, you know, you're going to be employer-employer? And I think it's particularly compelling that I've heard our student athletes say loud and clear today that they don't want to be treated as employees. So, Ms. Cole, I know in your testimony you said that classifying athletes as employees is not the right answer. Can you talk a little bit about why you feel that way?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your question, Congressman. I mainly, as I touched on in my testimony, am just focused on continuing to promote and grow the equity with Olympic and women's sports as well. And I do believe that the employment model could make that extremely difficult.
Mr. Whitman, you had said in your testimony that one of the things that you would like Congress to do is to clarify that the relationship between school and students is not that of employer and employee. Why do you think that that's not the right model?
I think it's not the right model on a number of different levels. First and foremost, from the perspective of the student athletes, I think it creates very real questions around the taxability of some of the benefits that they're already receiving as part of our system. I think it ultimately could result in less freedom for them in terms of their mobility to move from one school to the next. I think it ultimately could create less protections, I think, in terms of their status on the team, the opportunity to be cut or fired if they're not performing at a certain level. And ultimately, as we've heard from several witnesses today, the opportunity to lose roster spots across all of college athletics as a result of forcing schools to support this compensation. And importantly, they don't want to be employees. I've had the privilege the last 15 years of my career to work every day with student athletes. I take a lot of pride in having a great relationship with them, of having an understanding of their experience on our campus and what we can do to improve upon it. Not once have I had a student athlete come to me and say, Mr. Whitman, I'd really like to be an employee of this institution. I think we are developing a model through the House settlement that allows us to address many of their concerns. We're putting us in a position to provide them with additional compensation. We're in a position now to offer them more scholarships. We're doing things at the University of Illinois like providing a continuing education after they've broken time with the university if they want to come back and complete their degrees. We offer enhanced medical care where our student athletes are actually the beneficiaries of what I would call concierge medical service. They receive 24/7 care from independent medical authorities who provide care to our student athletes independent of any oversight or supervision from coaches or administrators. And ultimately, they want a greater voice. And I think that we're looking for ways to develop that through SAC, through some of the opportunities that we've given student athletes to provide feedback on our campus, whether that's in the form of exit surveys, end of the season interviews, and more informal conversations with administrators who are embedded with their programs. Ultimately, our student athletes are the beneficiaries of a very robust system and opportunity. That system continues to need tweaking, but ultimately designating them as employees is not that answer.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your testimony. And just in conclusion, let me reinforce, I think that there's a win-win-win here, and I'm hoping that Congress can work together with the NCAA and the schools and the athletes to make that happen. I yield back.
I agree. Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Now we have Ms. Clark. You're recognized.